Today on the show, we are going to talk about ethics in video games. We got a great guest, Nicholas Downey, Iron Lords podcast, and we are going to talk everything about video game ethics from the journalism side to video games and everything in between. Let's get to the episode right now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Xbox A. I'm Matt, that's Court, and special guest, Nicholas Downey. Nick, welcome to the show. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's
always good to, be among fellow Canadians in this space.
Oh yes,
so.
This is an all Canadian episode now that Babbitt. So,
hell yeah!
Preface to our very good friend Mr. Babbitt from PS Trophy Room had to couldn't be with us tonight. It's okay. We still love him. We understand.
Well,
hope everything's okay with him. But
yeah.
So we're not gonna talk about the one topic because he had a lot of opinions towards that. And so did we. But we're going to talk about ethics here, but we're not going to just talk about ethics as in Ubisoft needs to fix some of their ethics, and so does Activision Blizzard, or maybe just fire Bobby Kotick. But we wanted to talk about journalistic and what you see on YouTube and what you even see, for example, when the IGN author not too long ago, was it 2 years ago now? And I know Colin Moriarty had him on his show who plagiarized. And you also have people not finishing video games and doing reviews on them a lot lately. It seems to be a common practice. And we want to also talk about, trailers we see, and the game doesn't look like that when it comes out. We just want to talk in general about the industry and what's going on. And it all started when our friend Nicholas put out a tweet not too long ago complaining about people ripping off people's work, which he's not wrong about because it's happened a lot. So, let's go.
Let's talk about that then. Yeah, let's kick it off with that topic. Not naming names or anything like that, obviously, on the show. I mean, if you're like, I'm going to call out this thing, I will. But really, get your take on that to kick it off. That component of it in the industry of, if you or somebody is creating an article, doing a news piece, or even a review of a game, and then you're on YouTube now, and then you see those are my words. Like, you're watching a creator, you're like, I could beat for beat, or somebody picks it up, or Court has mentioned, like, yeah, I've read this article from, say, IGN, and then I stumble across a video, and I just read this, and now I'm hearing it. It's like, oh, this person's totally lifting this. What is your take on all of that? It's like, I guess from a larger perspective, like, how does that impact you? Is this kind of normal practice that the rest of us, like me, are catching up to? What are your thoughts on all of it?
Well, I've been doing content creation for about a decade now, because I started out in the YouTube space first, and then I switched to games writing and then podcasting and all that in about 2017. But I was part of YouTube content creation in the gaming sphere in like 2012 till about 2017. And something I always pride myself on is generally, if I did source anything, which wasn't too much back in the day, I just generally just kick stuff around. I would always try to link it, or say where I got it from or anything like that, because that's standard common practice. Is if someone does good work, you want to give them credit for the good work they do. It's just common courtesy, if nothing else. But it's way different from the YouTube space to the journalistic side of things. Like, I've worked on several independent sites. I've also been lucky enough to work in like Windows Central, Android Central. I've written a fair different amount of places. And the thing is like, sourcing is like rule number one. Because if you don't source properly and your site gets cease and desisted or anything for, improperly representing something, your site's gone. Google will wipe you off the map. People will not be able to find you or anything. There's huge repercussions for lifting or, copyright. I've dealt with, in my time of being an editor, I've dealt with people lifting articles from other people and copy and pasting them and trying to present it as their own article that they've created. I've dealt with that a couple of times. Like, there was a site I worked for where we ended up getting blacklisted because somebody plagiarized an article, and it actually caused issues with our site, and we had to redo our site. We had to like shut the site down, create a new site, and the whole 9 yards, because we were Google blacklisted because one person decided to copy and paste something. But unfortunately, in the YouTube space, those type of repercussions outside of, your standard DMCA takedowns and
Yeah.
everything else, they don't really exist. No one's really held accountable in the YouTube space in terms of, not only, where they get information from, but just information they say. Like, there's so many times where I've written something based off of a source that I've cited, and someone will go, no, 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 this YouTuber said this, you're wrong. And I'm like, but no, this is what the actual information is. They're like, no, no, they said this. I'm like, well, what's their source? They're like, well, they obviously have sources.
But
And
isn't
I'm
that
like,
too?
well, what's the source?
So I'm totally with you. This raises probably a larger issue around, I guess, quote, fake news and legitimate news, almost to that degree. That's what sparks in my head of thinking of just Twitter. Going on Twitter and seeing someone post an article, and we'll stick with video games, but post something to say, I saw such and such in this game, or I read that this game's going to have this. It's like, well, you're spewing out, and maybe that person writes articles for a site or something like that, or they have their own, but they just throw it out there. And there is no real accountability. There is no fact checking in that regard, right? It's just more of, well, what are your sources? Or we need to believe them. Why? Because they have a website or anything? Like,
well, it's almost like what happened just literally the other day when you saw a million YouTubers and people writing articles saying the makers of Battlefield are blaming Halo Infinite for the game being bad. Now, what really happened is there's a longer quote to everything that happened, but everybody focused on this one little part. Even Matt and I,
Yep.
we originally did a video, and then I was like, hey, Matt, so more of it's come out, and I don't think we should release the video. And we decided not to. Like, Matt and I thought about it, and we're like, you know what? We shouldn't, because it turned out the real story out of this was EA admitted to releasing a broken game and just said, Halo Infinite released and it wasn't broken. It didn't help us because we released a broken game. They didn't say we released a game and it didn't do well because Halo Infinite was out. That's not what they said, but that's how everybody took it. So the misinformation, if you went on YouTube, the only thing you saw was those videos. You saw there was literally within an hour of that coming out, that
Battlefield blames Halo, and
there was
EA
so
blames
many
Halo.
Battlefield blames Halo tweets, and there was so many YouTube videos, but there was not enough correction. The correction never takes over. You know what I mean? Like, us being Canadian right now, we know exactly how that feels for what just happened in Ottawa. And then you see our American friends, and they're putting stuff on Twitter, and you're like, where are you getting this from? Like, that's not even exactly what was, you know what I mean? Like, the misinformation. And then you even had today, and I'm sure, I know you probably saw it, Nick, with the whole Call of Duty being delayed. A certain someone put out a tweet, and another person backed it up and was like, that's my article. Like, you're literally quoting my article. Now, I know a lot of people went after the person that got mad. I'm not going to take sides here, but it literally just happened in video game Twitter about an hour ago, where someone said, hey, you're literally spreading my work and acting like you do it. And that person's saying that they didn't read the article and blah, blah, blah. But way too much of the word for word got into that tweet. But hey, who am I to say? But it literally just happened.
Yep.
So weird.
Yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing is like, once news breaks, even if something gets corrected later on down the road, the correction will never get as much traction as the original story. I'll heighten it back to one of the few news stories that I've actually broken myself. So everyone remembers back about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, there's that whole thing after Borderlands 3 released, and Gearbox said that they weren't going to be giving out any performance bonuses, right? Because the game didn't hit its numbers and everything else. That was a big story. All the major sites covered it and everything else. I found a LinkedIn post from a creative director that worked at Gearbox, and he said, nobody talked to any of us. We all got bonuses. They weren't as big as they were supposed to be, but this whole thing of we didn't get bonuses is a lie. We did get bonuses. They just weren't as big as everyone expected. So I reported that. And the response to that was the people that wrote the initial reports said that I was giving someone who's lying about something free air to spread misinformation about.
Was it because the perception from others was that almost the majority of us over here are citing and stating the same thing, as common in commonality, but you are the outlier. Now, so therefore, you are the one spreading misinformation when you're like, no.
you are the and the hilarious part is a bunch of smaller sites started running with my story and sourcing me and everything else, but none of the big sites that reported the original story ever reported that story.
Because it wasn't sexy enough.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's because it's not hot.
It wasn't sexy. I did get called out by a certain grumpy journalist who shall not be named, as stating that I was provided that certain issues should not be good versus evil. There should just be what the actual facts are. And apparently, by sourcing someone who's part of the dev team, that's not actual facts.
No, that's just
that makes no sense.
I'm not going to get into that.
You are creating lies.
But the thing is like, I think the hardest part for a lot of people to do in the space, it's not even necessarily just sourcing, is admitting when you got something wrong. That is the hardest thing to do. Is like, whether you're a YouTube creator, a podcast, or anything else, sometimes the hardest thing to do is just to, bite back your pride and say, yeah, you know what? I jumped the gun on this. I reported this too early, or I misreported this. I'm sorry. I should do better.
Nick, do you think that that's because the reason, one of the reasons why we don't see that from, and let's just say large outlets within video games, we don't see it is because the news cycle is so quick. Like it is a Twitter post to a Twitter post. Like it's funny because for me, growing up with sites like IGN, go to website, read articles, actually read the articles, even at a point when video news beats were not that huge. It was always about sitting there and like literally just sitting in your dorm room and you'd read through a number of different articles online. Now there is such a shift from reading the articles to the articles being fully flushed out, written with all the detail, with a video piece in there, to what feels like now it's transitioned into just literally Twitter headlines. And then that's the news beat. I guess, do you think that it's just a big inherent problem with just how things are nowadays as it's structured, where it's like there isn't time, even if a large outlet said we would like to? Because there's good people out there. People are not evil, but people are probably sitting there on some side of the camp going, yeah, I wish we could, but we really don't have time.
Well, I think part of the thing too is that, like you said, the 24-hour news cycle kind of allows you to kind of wheel through any issues that you might have, right? Like, oh, we misreported this, but hey, there's this new cool thing that you're going to focus on. So who cares, right? Like, there's always something coming off embargo. There's always something someone else can talk about. Sometimes you get lucky and someone else screws up and people will focus on their screw up versus your screw up. And like, it all kind of fades into the background because the lack of accountability is one thing, but the lack of reading through more than a headline is also the problem. Because what a lot of things, and the problem with not mainstream media in general, but as we're all Canadians saying here, dealing with our political climate right now, is that a news site will post a headline and then the information that's in that article does not reflect the information detailed in that headline, but it's good enough for people to post it everywhere because they agree with the headline but didn't read the body of the article. And even that's a big. And that the thing is that if your headline doesn't match the body of your article, it's misinformation at its core. And you're intentionally fueling fire to get people to share your article, not necessarily click on it. And I think that's what people don't understand is, like, with lordsofgaming.net, for example, I have access to all our analytics and everything in terms of where our clicks come from and everything else. I've had articles get 600, 700, 800 likes on Twitter, but the link click through on those tweets is like 16, 17. People are liking, they're commenting, everything else, but none of those people are actually clicking and reading the article. They are going purely off of the 150-word description and the headline that's in there.
Well, you notice, one thing I've noticed about like the Toronto Star and some newspapers here in Canada, if you look, even CBC News does it now, they put up their article, but then they literally just copy and paste the whole article into the tweet as well. Like they just keep adding on and adding on and adding on. And I get it because I notice impressions and so on and so forth. And I still am an old school person and I read the articles, and like people don't realize, and maybe they do, if you try and retweet someone's article and you haven't read it, Twitter will be like, hey, you didn't even read this. Yeah. And it gets into the whole clickbait and using that word. And I truly feel that we've gotten off on what really clickbait means. Like someone was in our comments once and said, "Oh, because you used a question mark, it's clickbait." And Matt and I had to like seriously think about this, and we're like, "Hold on a second."
But objectively, like ask, like we weren't like, "Screw you, you're wrong." We would sit there and be like, is this true? Like, okay, did we mislead?
And I had to like look it up, and I think what has happened is, if you put should you know or should you buy this game and put a question mark, that's not clickbait as long as your title is exactly what is in the article. If you put like Xbox is canceled and then question mark, and then you go through the thing and the person at the very end is like, no, it like has nothing to do with Xbox, that's clickbait. But we see a ton of that on YouTube, like a ton. And you do see it on Twitter as well, but you do see it more and more on YouTube, where I think some of the favorite headlines I see sometimes is Sony has new hardware update, or Xbox has new hardware update, and it's like something from the like they've added night mode
setting, yeah,
dark and people are acting like it's this new update. You know what I mean? When it's really just it's kind of tiny. So your headline is making it seem like they've added something crazy, but really it's not there. And that also takes away from someone like yourself, where you're going out there and putting some journalistic into an article, but because somebody on YouTube or even another site is put up this boombastic headline that ends up being nothing, the people have already clicked on that and they're done their cycle for the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And see, the part of the problem is too, is like, people have a lot higher of a standard for journalists than they do YouTube content creators. And I got a lot of kickback on that when I said YouTubers need to be held to the same standards as journalists. And people went, well, no, because why should somebody in their bedroom be held to the same account as someone who works for IGN or someone who works for Kotaku? I'm like, because at the end of the day, they're almost all of them are subcontractors that, like you, create content in their bedroom. Most freelancers are paid so poorly within this industry that they like, let me dial this in here. The biggest misconception people have with games journalism is clicks equals money. When any freelance gig I've ever had, you're paid by the article. That's it. Whatever the article is, doesn't matter how many views it gets. If it gets 1 or 1 million, your pay does not change. So there is nothing on you that gravitates, if I make this clickbaity, it's better for me. Now, big sites that are owned by Media Corps, they've got people that will tweak headlines, rewrite your headlines. Like 9 times out of 10, when I was freelancing at bigger sites, I didn't write my headlines. Someone else wrote my headlines. They wrote the headline for the article for me.
And I think Jez Corden just put it like about a couple weeks ago. I think he had a headline on one of his Windows Central thing, and people called, and he's like, I don't even write the headline, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like they've got people for that to generate what they want to generate. And like the thing is that I'm not going to begrudge somebody who writes an article and gets paid like $10 an article, for example, and writes this, and then some SEO wizard that's paid by a media company puts a clickbait title on it. I'm not going to drag that person through the mud for it. But if if you're posting videos on YouTube like Xbox dead or PlayStation dead or, all this stupid stuff where we see like, Phil Spencer's and Jim Ryan's face, photoshopped onto a turtle and all this stuff. And you're getting like,
we put him on a moon.
Let me write that.
Put him on a moon.
Let me write that down.
On a moon.
On turtle.
And you're getting like 15, 20,000 views on your videos, you're making way more in ad revenue than that person writing that article is.
100%.
Yep.
So, and then to have the audacity to watch these guys who don't hold themselves to any standards, will take paid advertisements on their videos to then go around and go, journalists don't have any integrity. And I'm just like, okay, so we don't have any integrity. We can't take paid ads. Most of the time, if you write for a site, you can't have your own separate streaming personality. That's something Gene Park talks about all the time with Washington Post. He's not allowed to have a streaming personality. He's not allowed to have outlier, incomes or monetization for himself.
And I think Justin Legary, the only reason he is able to do that right now is because he's on mat leave.
Yeah.
Oh, so technically he is not with
Yeah, well, because
IGN
remember,
on the books.
Greg Miller had to leave. Greg Miller
Yeah,
had to
because
leave
it's a
IGN.
conflict, right? It would have been a conflict of
Yeah.
interest if he's reporting on something, and yeah.
So did Alana Pierce had to leave IGN for the exact same reason. They both were making too much money, and I'm pretty sure, like Dustin Legary right now, I know he's on mat leave, like, and he's getting a ton of. He's literally just covering this whole Activision thing over and over again from a different angle, which is fine. Like, people can hate on him, and I'm more of the person that I'm like, you know what, you can hate on whoever you want, but if you're continuing to say it every day, this is the person you hate or this is the thing, you know what? I just tune you out because I don't care anymore. Like, there's a lot more things to worry about in the world than what someone else is doing. But
Yeah.
that's just me. But I'm pretty sure for Dustin's sake, it's because he's on mat leave. And once he isn't, he can't do his videos anymore.
Yeah, a lot of companies, when you start signing your your contracts and wherever, some companies are pretty restrictive, some aren't. It varies company to company, and it changes year over year over year. Of course, as things flux and change and everything else. But that's always the thing that kind of annoys me with it, is like everyone thinks that, like, if you're a games writer, it's on easy street. You get all this free stuff. You get, these review codes, these care packages from PR and all this stuff. Like, I've covered big games, and I've covered big games in less than 48-hour scenarios. Like, I got Gears 5 2 days before launch and got a review out for that on launch day. I've had to do those releases. It's very rare I get blessed with a ton of time to play a game or experience a game. It's a rush to meet a deadline, and then to hear people be like, well, you're biased because you got it early, or you're saying this, only because you want to keep getting review copies, or wherever the case may be. But, like, that's not how the industry works. Like, all these people don't understand how the industry works. I've given 4 out of 10s, 3 out of 10s to games, and had very cordial correspondence with PR afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like if you sit there and go, your game's bad for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, they're not going to go, well, screw you.
You don't get anything. Yeah.
You don't get anything.
But it probably depends too,
Well,
on like what the approach is of the reviewer, the person writing the article. If your article was dunking on the game in a really like negative light, like a nasty, like almost like this is unnecessary, and maybe also dragging the company and the developer themselves through the mud within your review, it's probably not good for business. But to keep a relationship going, that is.
I gave Halo a 7.5.
How dare you?
I still got cookies for Valentine's Day from Xbox, but
that
I definitely gave Halo a 7.5.
But it's funny to me though, Nick, because this is something that I've always looked at the lens being on the outside, and I am a freckle of a gnat on the hair of gaming. Like, I am just here for a good old time. But that conversation around, someone getting a review code or getting a care package, and then the review for said game is fantastic. I think that does rub people the wrong way, because they just kind of put those two pieces together and say review code or care package, and this guy reviewed it and said the game is amazing. So clearly it's crap.
No, it's just honestly, people can hate me for what I'm about to say. It's just jealousy. That's all it is. They see it, and because you were seeing it far too often. Like, look at Horizon Zero Dawn, Forbidden West just released. I've heard from many people the game's amazing. I can't wait to play it. But you have these people that I love this box and I like this box. And no matter what, I'm going to figure out a way to say you only like this or you only like that. So they go out of their way to build these narratives in their head that no matter what, like, who is it? The lawyer that's always on Season Gaming, Hogue, I believe. Yeah, he put out a tweet today that was beautiful. He goes, look at this, a tale of 2 weeks. In 1 week, they told him that he was a Sony pony, and then the other week, they told him he was a Microsoft shill. Like, It didn't matter what he said. No matter what, the narrative doesn't change. And look at Dustin Legary right now. He does videos about PlayStation, but he's covered a lot of Xbox lately because Xbox has been in the news. But they're like, oh, he works for Xbox. No, you know who he works for? He works for IGN. Trust me. Xbox don't pay him nothing. If this whole thing that these companies pay us money, no, they pay us nothing.
Nope.
They're very nice to us. They're great. They don't pay us anything. Please do not think they do, because they don't. That's not what happens.
And I think the thing that people don't understand is like everyone thinks that getting access to games early and reviewing games is like this easy breezy fun thing to do. Reviewing games is the most stressful thing I do on a regular basis for a website. I'm literally the assistant editor chief on an independent website, so I'm helping to coordinate like 20 writers and covering news and everything else. But reviews are just a next level of stress all the time because you're trying to hit embargoes, you're trying to, make sure
Yeah.
your content doesn't violate any embargoes. You're doing all this extra stuff in order to make sure that everything's polished front to back because everyone's going to put your review under a microscope. So you want to make sure this represents not only the writer who's writing that review in the best light, but also your site in the best light and going, hey, are we explaining this in a clear way? Are we giving a fair opinion on this game? Are we making sure that, like, I've kicked reviews back before at sites I've worked and went, hey, this came off a little too like, hey, buddy, we need to dial that back. You need to look at this a little bit more critically and kind of, smooth some things out because it comes across like, it was okay, but I don't really want to over criticize. No, what were the things you didn't like? Like it's all comes down to those small details and that care that you put into it. Some people don't care what they churn and put out into the ether. We know that, whether it's YouTube, games media, whatever the case may be, some people don't care about presenting the front to back. But that's something like we have always prided ourselves on, is making sure that we're accurate and that we're providing an honest insight into what your game is. And no matter how nice you are or how good we are with you, I'm going to be honest with you. It's kind of like, if your friend goes, hey, I enjoy basketball, so I'm going to go play in the NBA. And you're like,
well,
yeah, dude, go for it. Yeah, quit your job. Screw your wife. Go play in the NBA. Do that. And then when he inevitably doesn't even make G League, you're a jerk for telling him, yeah, it's fine. Go for it. It's a really extreme example, but
Yeah.
I think everyone thinks it's super easy to be like a games critic and that's so easy to review these games, but playing a game and being critical of it at every turn is exhausting because you can't
100%.
sit there and just enjoy the game. You have to sit there and go, well, I like this, but would your average person like this? Is this plot easy to follow? You're just nitpicking things endlessly and you're just like, am I even enjoying this anymore?
Nick, I did want to circle back though, because on the like what you're talking about when it comes to reviews, and then even like with YouTube specifically, and creators out there pulling from articles for those reviews. You mentioned earlier of like, there is huge amounts of ethics, and what shocked me is when you just said earlier, you're like, like we have sites that'll get shut down or you get blacklisted on the internet and on Google for misrepresenting things, or plagiarism or anything like that. I had no idea that that's like just in an instant it's gone. But on YouTube, there isn't. It is still very much the Wild West. Even though
not unless you put a 2K video up, they hit you in a second.
Boom Shakalaka or WB, they will not.
Yeah.
Or Rockstar.
WB, you could put like a second of one of their trailers, and they will hit you in seconds of anything. Yeah. They will be like, "Nope, take that down now. That's over. That's done."
But like, what needs to be done in your opinion to improve? Because I don't think there's ever like there's a magic bullet and there's a fix to everything. But what do you think is some of the things that need to be improved on the YouTube side? Or just from from content creators in general within video gaming on YouTube to improve this, because you're out there slugging it out, putting out content, written formatted content on the internet, putting out reviews, working with large teams. There's a lot of moving pieces, and then it feels like in an instant someone can swoop in and just be like, yeah, grab this, grab that, and boom, I've got a 10-minute video. How do you improve something like that if you're kind of at the top of the helm?
There's multiple ways that this could be handled. One is if you're a writer and someone clearly has plagiarized your work, call it out. I know it sounds so petty, but copy, snippet your article, video trim the section of the video and go, what's up with this? And tag the creator. Even DM them privately. Like sometimes, not everything needs to be dragged out publicly. Sometimes DMing someone and going, hey, You lifted this from my article clearly. Can you at least source it, or try to hash it out privately? Because honestly, dragging people through public isn't always the best answer. But one thing that definitively needs to improve and that would help this space is when your favorite YouTuber gets dragged for doing something like this, or it's revealed that they've lifted information or anything else, don't go to bat for them.
Just because you like them.
The biggest problem with most of the bigger channels that kind of are guilty of this is the moment they smell any form of trouble on the wind, they sick their subscriber base on everybody.
They almost barstool them.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing is like you get into Twitter and everything else, and you disagree with one of these large content creators, or if they lift something or whatever the case may be, you say something disagreeing with them, and then next thing you know, you've got 18 notifications on your phones because you got all these 20 follower accounts telling you how wrong you are because this person would never do that, and yada, yada, yada. You've got to hold content creators to the same level you hold journalists. I have a guy, and he is my best friend. Honest and true, he is my best friend. I wrote a Days Gone review back when that game came out. I gave it a 7 out of 10 because my 40-hour save file corrupted and busted, so I couldn't finish the game. So I gave
Sounds
it
like an Avengers problem.
Yeah.
But
and this man sent me threats in DMs, so I blocked him. He then created another account to send me threats. I have blocked 39 of this man's accounts.
That's a lot of time he's got on his hands. How do you have time to do that, let alone Jesus. Sorry.
And he will literally, about once a month, he'll create an account and basically copy and paste the same threat he's been using. And like, I don't know if it's satire. I don't know, like, if him and his like brother are sitting at a computer giggling while doing this. I don't know. But all I do is I look at it, I block him, and I keep moving on with it. And like, I've a massive collection of these people from doing my years of reviews of people going, well, you didn't get this exact detail right, and we're mad about it. And I'm like, yeah, but you're literally if I click on your follows list, there's a dude there who just lied about the, what the Xbox Series X could do or what the PS5 is going to do in like 15 videos doing their next gen spec, speculation. But, you're not sending them messages, or at least I don't think you're sending them messages like you're sending me. So, like, what's the deal? Why is one more accountable than the other? It's either you hold everyone to one standard or you hold no one to a standard. I don't think the second one is a viable.
Do you think it's because there is a standard in there almost of like whether people admit it or not, that like from a journalism and the written words mean more versus the YouTube side, and the YouTube side is much more seen as just pure digestible entertainment?
I think it's just people suck. Like we saw
there's
Perfect.
There's 100%.
Friend of the show, Luke's in the chat, and he brought up a great example. Like the whole thing with Jason Schreier today. Like we can say it because everybody saw it. Jason Schreier should have DM'd that person. He didn't. He tried to drag him through the mud, and then everybody was like, "Jason, you're calling him out for something that you do to developers all the time. Like, chill, brother. Like, just figure out another way to get off your high horse." And I think the problem is people get this perception and then they decide, well, I'm never going to change that perception. Like we have right now with the people review bombing. Like, what is the point of that? Like the amount of people that are review bombing Horizon Forbidden West right now, you're not going to change those people's perceptions. So what you have to do is just not care. Like I did a very successful Boston Bruins webpage for a really long time, and I did Boston Bruins stuff. And whenever I gave my opinion on a player, that doesn't go away. That I still get DMs from people telling me that I'm wrong about something from 5 years ago. That'll never change. It's because, unfortunately, some people suck, and they're always going to suck. They're never going to change. They're just going to suck. And all you got to do, and this is all I do, is I just mute. I even mute people that for a little bit, if I see that if they're continuing to put out negative things in the Twitter space over and over again, or complaining about this creator and only complaining about people, I mute them for a bit. And you know where I learned that from? I learned that from Cog. He told me he has that 10 tweet rule.
Yep.
And if after 10 tweets, it's all negative, you're gone.
Yep.
And he's not wrong.
But it's funny with that too, Core, because like I look at you can hear like so many different sides of people's just even Twitter timelines and their feeds of, oh my God, it's so negative and it's just bull crap and I hate all of this. People are just making stuff up left and right. I look at mine, and at least for what I at least pay attention to, I'm like, yeah, people seem quite okay. There's the odd guy that's going to be kind of weird about stuff. They get through. But in large part, on average, I'm like, it's a fine day here on Matt's Twitter feed. And then the next person has a completely different experience. And I know that's there's algorithms involved there, but it's fascinating to me that people will have very different experiences, even around even the same topics of stuff.
No, there's. I think as a YouTuber, I guess that's what we are now. I think we have to hold ourselves to a standard. Like when I saw your tweet, Nicholas, I was happy to. In my mind, I was like, wait a second, we go out of our way to make sure that we put the article, we link the article in our description, and we always start the video by saying, we read this great article at Windows Central, or we read this great article at Iron Lord's Game. Like we go out of our way to say it, and then say the author, and then we can read what's from the article, and then we give our opinion based on the facts that journalist is presenting. And so when I read that, I was like, wait a second. And I started going through my YouTube and even articles that I've read. And I was like, oh my God, this person is literally just taking other people's work.
Yep. Yeah. It's so bizarre to me because there are news channels on YouTube that do incredibly original content and mix in like humor bits and everything else. Like, Maddie Plays that does like Defining Duke with Lord Cognito. His news videos make me laugh because he mixes humor into it. There's a whole bunch of it, and it's just him spewing his opinion on wherever the news is. And those kind of videos I love, but it's these monotone delivery. Okay, so you're reading an article to your audience and you're monetizing it. And that's the biggest problem I have with it, is because you're just cashing in on what someone else spent time doing, and what you're doing is you're using stock footage that you've been recording on your console all week. You're cutting a couple of pieces together, and then you're cracking open Audacity, reading off your script for 10 minutes and posting a video, and boom, there's your work for the day. And like, it's not only disrespectful to the authors they're ripping it off, it's disrespectful to content creators that put in all that effort to write their own original scripts, to do their own original thoughts on these, to take the time to read news from multiple sources and then form an educated opinion about it. Because I think that's what bugs me the most, is how many podcasts I see that are absolutely massive that do zero to no homework on the stuff they're talking about. And then I see like, I'll use Luke with the Xbox expansion pass, for example. I love that show. I listen to it every week when it drops on my way to work, because Luke will not put a topic on his docket that he doesn't know anything about.
Yeah.
That he doesn't just read an article off of. If he's talking about something, it's something he's passionate about and he knows about.
And even this week when he talked about Elden Ring, I had to DM him. I'm like, hey, dude, I want to hear your opinion, because I'm not a professional. Like I'm not very good at Souls games. So it's like, so I want to hear from someone that is not good at the game. Like, yes, like I know Badbit and all them, they're great, but when he made that whole thing and he was talking about he would rather get someone that's more of an expert on it, I was like, no. For the first time ever, I don't want an expert. I want to know from someone who sucks at this game if the game is good.
Yeah, and that's kind of the great thing, is like, I think so much of review discourse around, well, all these reviewers suck, Metacritic sucks. If everyone just took the time and go find yourself a reviewer that you like, that has similar tastes to you that you do, and then you just follow that reviewer. And when they review a game, you go, oh, okay, so you like the same kind of games I do, and you like this game. So maybe this game is worth my time looking into. That's why I don't do a lot of major sites reviews unless I know a few of those people, because I don't really care what IGN thinks of a game. I want to know what that one person thinks of that game.
Yeah, and like I like Gary Whitta. Like, I don't know what it is. Yeah. Gary Whitta is my man. He plays on easy mode, and when he doesn't like a game, I usually don't like the game either. Hey, spoiler alert, I'm having a really hard time with Cyberpunk right now, and I don't get it. I'm trying my darndest.
And I don't get it.
It's hurting me, man.
But it's okay, because even to something like that, it's if the problem I have and the challenge I have is like if Court were to just put that out in the Twitterverse,
Would kill me.
He would be destroyed in seconds because he'd be like, well, get good at Cyberpunk, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're clearly doing things wrong. It's like, people can just not enjoy a video game despite its popularity or despite its hype or whatever. Maybe Cyberpunk's not a good example, but you just get roasted though if you did that.
Friend of the show, Luke Lore, I know he's in the chat. He taught me something that I have changed the way I speak about games. Before I was like, oh, that game sucks, but it doesn't. I now use the term, and this is actually more fitting. I just say the game's not for me.
Yeah.
Because the game can be good. A perfect example is I just recently I said to Matt, I was like, oh, I'm going to play Hellblade. I really wanted to like it. I heard so many great things about it. And I played 7-8 hours of it, and I was like, this game is just not for me. I didn't even want to continue playing it. And it sucked. I felt bad because everybody said how much of a masterpiece was. And I was just like, and Matt was like, are you still going to review it? I'm like, no, I'm just going to move on. No one needs to hear that I didn't like it. But it's not, I didn't like it just because it just didn't bring me in. There was pieces I liked, but there was just these things that I was like, it's not what I was feeling for at the moment.
And what's interesting about that is like when I'm, sometimes we have multiple people review the same game just so we can kind of get a feeler for how different people feel about that game, because I'm not necessarily as interested in someone who gushes about a game. I'm more interested in like someone who bounces off a game that everyone says is 9 out of 10 and they're like, no, this game just really didn't do it for me. And I'm like, okay, why?
Yeah.
Why didn't it do it for you? Explain to me, like, what was it that made that game not fun to experience for you? But that's the kind of person that I am, is I don't attach myself. Like, I'm a massive fan of a bunch of different franchises that have critic ratings all over the board. Like, State of Decay 2 is like my favorite Xbox One game by a mile. I've got like
Matt
600
loves that
hours.
game.
Yeah.
I've got like
I love it.
600 hours in that game. The developers follow me and everything else. But like when I reviewed that game back when it came out, I gave that like a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, there you go. It's not good. It's not good.
It was not good. It wasn't user friendly. It wasn't fun at the time, but I still really enjoyed it. And I think that's what the biggest problem people have, because like you said, you wrote about Boston Bruins, so sports mentality is
it's cutthroat.
It's cutthroat as hell, because you go, I don't think this player is a good fit for our team. And everyone's like, oh my God, what are you saying? Like, what are you doing? You're crazy. And it's like, it's just an opinion.
Court does this now every day, I think, on Twitter, where I see Court just drop something sports or hockey related. He throws it out there, and I swear he's just like, "It's gonna throw this out there and just see what the backlash is." This player sucks. By
I just want to see people, and it sounds terrible. Sometimes I just like seeing people cry for no reason. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna throw out an opinion that I know is educated because I follow the sport and watch it. But I know that a lot of people that are opinionated to a one area, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna poke the bear a bit. That's what we call it in like Bruins land. We're like, we'll call it poking the bear. Let's see what's going on. See how pissed off I can make someone for no reason whatsoever. But that's just me when I'm having a bad day, and I'm just like, this will make me feel better. But in the video game world, and I get it, like my favorite game last year was Psychonauts 2. Like that was by far my favorite game, but it wasn't everybody else's favorite game. But you know what? Yeah. That's okay. Who cares?
The thing is what people need to unattach themselves, especially in the social media space, is the most opinionated person doesn't mean they're the most knowledgeable person. And that is a hard line for a lot of people to draw in the sand. It's just because someone has a super strong opinion about something doesn't mean they know a lot about something. I reviewed Uncharted 4 when it came out. I gave the game a 7 out of 10 because I thought it was a real drag near the end. And I had this guy who was like, Uncharted 4 is a masterpiece. And he went off on me for like 3 months about this. I left him muted or whatever. I unmuted him after he stopped tweeting. I unmuted him after, a couple of months or whatever. And 2 years later, I see a tweet. It's this guy's tweet. And he's like, guys, I finally got a PlayStation 4. I can finally play Uncharted 4.
No.
And I went, so hold up.
He's like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. going to destroy this man now.
I'm not even kidding you. It's probably one of the, because I'm not going to play Horizon right away. I was debating whether to pay the $10 that Matt just paid and play Uncharted 4 again. I was like, because I just played Shadow of the Tomb Raider and loved it. Like, played Living Daylights out of it. And then I'm like, I go into Cyberpunk and I'm like, oh, and then you just said Uncharted 4. I'm like, come on, Nicholas, come on. I love that. But to each their own. Like,
well, this is different though. This man is lying. Like, he is out there trolling for years.
No, but that's what the internet is. Yep. If you've got to have the people you feel safe to have your opinion to. I Nathan and Luke are in the chat. I can talk to them about video games. I know I can talk to Nick when I see him on Twitter. I can talk to our friend Steve Vigvari. But if I've never communicated with you, there's probably a reason. Because it's my 3 strikes thing. I need you to reply to me 3 times before I think your opinion is valid for me to communicate back. And it has nothing to do with me agreeing with you. Because look at me and Babbitt. We probably disagree 80% of the time when we talk on Twitter. But that's okay. I still respect the guy and love the guy. It is what it is. Like, I don't know, man. People are just...
Joe just has bad opinions. That's
100%.
He
really does.
But yeah.
But anyways, people suck.
And that's kind of the thing is, like, the biggest problem that's driven the issues we're seeing now in the games media space, and especially what's been driven since the launch of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X launch, has been the monetization of fanboyism. At the end of the day, it's how that base has now been monetized. Like, it was always toxic back in the day, like Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS3, PS4. It was always toxic, but it wasn't monetized. But now we've monetized it. It's the same thing as, like, fringe wing politics. No matter whether you're left or right, it's monetized to hell now, because people are so easily separated from their money if you tell them what they want to hear. And, like, there's people that I shall not name, that are Twitter users that claim they are content creators and take PayPal donations, but all they do is tweet. They tweet these half-baked console war tweets, and they're like, here's my PayPal at the end, and people give them money. People send them games. And I'm just like, it's an endless feeding machine, because I don't honestly believe that 98% of these people that have these big online personalities even believe any of the stuff they peddle. I believe they're all sitting in a group chat together and going, look at these idiots eating this all up. Because, like, there's no way that people can be this naive about this stuff. Like, I don't know. I grew up in the generation with, like, Howard Stern and everything else. Like, shock jocks are just shock jocks to me. There's nothing special about being a shock jock. But for so many people, it's such a draw of, oh, he's telling the truth because he tells it raw. No, he's saying it the way you want to hear it. He's not necessarily saying it in a unique way. He's just telling you and confirming what you already want to hear. And that's what people want from reviews. That's what they want from games media articles. Because the people, when I was writing about Xbox in 2016 and people were like, screw Xbox, Xbox sucks. I was like, yeah, Xbox sucks. And they're like, oh, well, there's no media bias against PlayStation. Da, da, da. I'm like, no, that's fine. Whatever. People are writing how they feel, and that's fine. And now those same people that are like, media bias doesn't exist, are the ones screaming in my article mentions going, well, why is everyone like Xbox now? PlayStation's way better, even though PlayStation isn't talking about anything right now. Why are you only writing about Xbox? Because I'm only getting Xbox press releases. I don't know what you want to do. I can't make news for you. Like, I can, but it's not going to be anything for real. And that's the biggest frustration is, if there's news to cover, we will cover it. If there's nothing to talk about, I'm not going to,
clickbait.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Like, it's like watching sports around trade deadline, right? The last week before trade deadline in sports. And it's like, okay, so this is how the Toronto Raptors are going to get LeBron James. I'm like, shut up. It's not going to happen. Why are we even, like, contemplating
Why are we here?
Well, literally today, Elliot Friedman was talking about how the Leafs were going to do all these trades, and I look at their cap, and I'm just like, oh, just stop. Just stop. just stop, people. Anyways, you know what? This has been awesome, and we could go all night on this, but...
Absolutely.
Nick, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. It was phenomenal, and I think we've all come to the realization that people suck, and they can't get any better. And Matt and I are the best, and so is Nick. And
Video games
Luke's
are fun.
awesome. Oh, and Babbitt sucks, right? That's we did come to that.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
my problem is that Joe just doesn't treat Luke's mom with enough respect. That's all there is.
Jeez.
That's all there is to it. But
Wow, let's end it
I'm
right
sure-
there. That is
Yeah.
the best line.
Nick, if you can though, before you run and say anything more that's going to be about Luke's mom, please plug all of your stuff, my friend.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Nicholas_Downey. You can find all my written work at lordsofgaming.net. I'm dropping a Crossfire X review tomorrow, which is for reference, it's the lowest review score I've given out in 7 years. So look out for that. That'll be fun. And yeah, great stuff coming this week. And it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you both. And definitely, anytime you guys need another Canadian to hop on, just let me know.
We got another one. We did it, Quirt.
We got another Canadian that likes being with us.
Boom. Thanks, buddy.